How's everybody doing? I've got here chapter 2 of book 3 of the Royal Rangers series, Duel at Araluen. Let's go ahead and get into it. The men in the hilltop stockade were stirring with the first light of dawn. The sentries on the walls, who had been on duty since midnight, were red-eyed and yawning. They greeted the men who relieved them with a mixture of reactions, some grateful that the long vigil through the dark hours was over, others irritable if their relief was a few minutes late. Then they all headed down the stairs for the compound, where the fireplaces by the lines of tents were being stirred into new life. The smell of wood smoke filtered through the fort, along with the welcome aroma of coffee brewing and bacon being set to sizzle in pans. Horace and Gillen paced the timber walkway inside the wall, offering words of encouragement to the men who had taken over the watch. "Keep a good eye out," Horace said from time to time. "We don't want those Sunderland beggars to surprise us." The sentries answered cheerfully enough. After all, Horace thought, they hadn't been on the midnight to dawn watch, which was the most fatiguing one of all. Along with the body's craving for rest at that time, a sentry felt alone and vulnerable while his comrades slept. He would be peering through the uncertain darkness for 5 hours, straining his eyes, imagining he saw movement where there was none, dealing with a sudden surge of panic. Should I sound the alarm? Was that someone crawling through the long grass? That constant tension sapped a person's energy, mental and physical. Horace saw the cavalry lieutenant who assigned the sentries each day. The man was patrolling the wall in the opposite direction to Horace and Gillen, making sure the men were alert. Horace beckoned to him, and the officer approached and came to attention, straightening his shoulders a little and raising his forefinger to the brim of his helmet. "The men on the midnight to dawn watch," Horace began. "How are you selecting them?" The lieutenant thought about the question for a second or two. "Usually it's a punishment for the odd minor offense, sir," he said. "Dirty equipment or an untidy sleeping space." Horace nodded several times. "I thought it might be something like that. In future, just assign it on a routine schedule. Don't have the same man pulling that duty 2 or 3 days in a row." The lieutenant hesitated. He looked doubtful. "Yes, sir," he said, but his tone indicated that he didn't understand. "Those hours before dawn are where we are most vulnerable," Horace explained. "If a man is put on watch as a punishment, he'll be resentful, and he'll tend to think about how hard done by he's been. That'll make him less attentive to his job." The lieutenant's face cleared. He hadn't considered that. In the 3 years he'd been in the army, being assigned to the dawn watch had been a traditional punishment for minor infringements. And since men who were lazy or untidy often infringed more than once, they were often put on the dawn watch repeatedly. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir," he said, straightening a little more. Horace smiled at him. "No harm done. Just change things up in the future." He dismissed the officer with a casual gesture, and he and Gillen continued their pacing along the walkway. He sniffed the air experimentally. "Nothing like the smell of frying bacon in the morning," he said. Gillen shrugged. "Enjoy the smell. There will be precious little of it to eat." Several days previously, Horace had cut their rations, trying to eke out their limited supplies of food. The tall warrior nodded, a worried look on his face, as he thought about the inevitable day when they would run out of provisions. He moved to the wall and rested his elbows on top of the logs, peering down at the enemy camp below them. Gillen joined him. The Red Fox camp was coming awake, just as the men in the hill fort were. Smoke from their rekindled fires could be seen at half a dozen points. There was no wind yet, and the smoke streamed up vertically until it dissipated. Men were moving around the camp with the lack of urgency and energy of early risers who still wanted to be in their blankets. "No shortage of bacon there," Gillen commented. Horace grunted in reply. "What do you think their next move will be?" the ranger continued. Horace pursed his lips. "They don't really need to do anything," he said. They know they've got us trapped here. They must realize we're short of food. They can afford to wait us out. Of course," he continued, "they'll probably try the odd night attack, trying to catch us napping. If nothing else, it'll spoil our sleep and keep us awake at night." "That's no good," Gillen replied. "When I'm asleep is the only time I don't feel hungry." "You're lucky," Horace told him. "I dream of food when I'm hungry." "You dream of food when you're not hungry," his friend said. As if prompted by their discussion, Horace's stomach rumbled mightily. Gillen feigned shock, stepping away from the big knight. "My goodness! I thought we were having an earthquake there," he said, in mock alarm. "If we don't get some food soon, we may well have one," Horace replied. "There's always the spare horses," Gillen pointed out. Horace snapped around to look at him. "Are you suggesting we slaughter some of them for food?" he asked, the anger evident in his tone. Gillen shrugged apologetically. "Well, it has been done before," he said. Then, seeing the stubborn set of Horace's jaw, he continued. "But I don't think things are as bad as all that yet. What I was thinking was that we might let the spare horses go, drive them out through the gate. That way, the grain and fodder we have for the rest of them will last twice as long." Horace's angry expression faded. "It's a good thought," he said. Then he frowned. "Mind you, telling a cavalryman to abandon his horse is a hard thing to do." "Better than eating it," Gillen pointed out. "That's true. We'll see how things go. One thing's for sure, we don't need remounts while we're stuck here." They studied the enemy camp for some minutes in silence. "They've gone to a lot of trouble to lure us here," Gillen said thoughtfully. "I'd say they plan to kill us," Horace said. "Precisely. But why go to all that trouble? What else did they have in mind? Surely they didn't just say, 'Let's trick Horace and Gillen into coming north, and then we'll kill them.' There must have been some further part to the plan." "Like taking Castle Araluen?" Horace said. This was the conclusion they always came to when they discussed the situation, and Gillen sighed in frustration. "I can't think of anything else they might have had in mind. Can you?" Horace looked troubled by the question. "No, I can't. But the castle is no easy mark. It's virtually impregnable. Even Morgarath knew that, and he had thousands of troops with him." He paused, and Damone is a good man. Even with a small force, he managed to keep them out. "Unless they trick their way in," Gillen suggested. But now Horace was more definite in his rebuttal. "They wouldn't fool Cassandra," he said, then added a little ruefully, "I've never managed to do it in 19 years of marriage." "Still, they must have something in mind. I can't help wondering what it might be." "I guess we'll find out when we send that lot packing." Horace jabbed a thumb at the camp below them. Gillen looked at him in feigned surprise. "Are we going to send them packing?" he said. "How are we going to manage that?" Horace patted him on the shoulder. "You're going to come up with a masterful plan to do it." Gillen nodded several times. "I suppose I should have realized that. That's what you Rangers do. You're plotters and schemers, and you're very clever with it. I have every confidence you'll come up with an idea. Just don't leave it too long." "I'll see what I can figure out. Maybe I'll have a nap. I plot and scheme much better when I'm napping. In the meantime, let's go and get some of that rapidly shrinking store of bacon." Horace pushed off from the parapet with both hands and turned toward the stairs leading to the compound below. "Now that's a good plan. I knew I could rely on you." All right, that is going to bring us to the end of Chapter 2. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you next time in Chapter 3. God bless, and have a good one.